Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show. On episode 144. I think we've got a good topic today with lots of interest. So, Anton, you want to roll out our topic for the day?
Good morning, everybody. And as always, thank you so much for joining. Always grateful to our audience, whether you're listening live or on a recording. Today, we're going to be diving into one of the three main buckets of the human SOS process, and it's leadership, specifically talking about making an impact as a leader. I am always happy to discuss leadership because Kevin is a really, really good leadership coach. And I hope that if you are in need of leadership coaching, whether it be for your team or for individuals, you reach out to Kevin and get some time with him to discuss how he can help you. But today, talking about impact, made a post yesterday on LinkedIn talking about a good leader can get people from point A to point B. Ultimately, that is the job of a leader. I think that oftentimes we talk about the details and all the things that goes into doing that, but that's first and foremost what leaders are for. When the word term first came around. But a great leader will not just get people from point A to point B. A great leader will get them there while making positive impact along the way. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. Any shout outs? Anybody here yet?
No, we haven't got anybody that's come up yet. Uh, but I know we've got a lot of folks signed up, more than we have recent times. So I'm assuming they'll join us here shortly. Um, well, leadership and is an interesting topic. It's a challenging topic. There's been a lot written about it, a lot of different how tos and what tos and things like that. But recently, I came up with a quote that I think at least builds a foundation for the concept of leadership, and that is leadership without relationship usually is dictatorship. And one of the key elements, and this is something that's a challenge for our current workforce environment, is that we don't operate based on a strong basis of relationship. We're still operating under management style, traditional style management, going back to my generation. And management is not about relationship, it's about checking the boxes off to make sure that we are lined up with what we need to be lined up with from a checkbox standpoint. And what the big shift is that we have to go to a point where we value and make a priority relationships with the people that we lead. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a relationship with the people you're leading, you're going to have a hard time going beyond getting them to go from point A to point B. We are, we talked about a couple of months ago about quiet quitting. Part of the reason quiet quitting has come around is that leaders or managers that can only get people from point A to point B are causing people to say, okay, well, all I'm going to do is go from point A to point B as required. Otherwise, not going to happen. Whereas if we want to create real impact as a leader, we've got to make sure that we are in relationship with the people that are followers for us. And so we have to build that relationship. And it's not something that happens accidentally. And it's not something that happens without applying principles. Because if all we do is build a relationship with people in the workplace that report to us, all we're going to do then is become friends. And that's not the top goal of being an effective leader, is not to become friends with the people that we work with, but to be a leader. And now, quite often, if we do this well, then the concept of becoming friends is there, and it can be done in the right situation, timing, and environment. But again, it takes work. It takes principles applied, and it takes lots of practice. And one of the things that I am more convinced of is that the people that need wisdom more than anybody are leaders, because so much of being a leader involves making wise choices and having that big picture perspective that wisdom brings. Uh, what's been your experience in encountering leaders of different stripes, Anton?
Honestly, leaders they can make impact, before we can make impact, we have to almost have permission to make impact. And
Mm,
what you're talking about, trust, the relationship, that has to be there. I'm not going to open up with you as a leader and be vulnerable where I need help, where I need growth, where I need development, whatever that may be. Because if I don't trust you, why would I show you a weakness if I still think that you're going to compare against my peers, and that may cost me to not have as high of a promotion ability, or maybe even potentially lose my job in a tough market because you're looking for weak links, right? Many leaders are perceived to be somebody that's searching for the weakest link so they can cut them and replace them. So if I don't have a relationship and I don't have trust in you, I'm not going to go to you for that. And a lot of impact comes outside of work. We
mm,
often miss this part when we discuss leadership and make an impact, is that leaders need to make impact both between the four walls of an organization, but also outside of them, because the entire person comes to work. We shouldn't just focus on just the employee aspect of them, but the human aspect of them as well. And without the two things that you're mentioning, there's just no way. So permission to make impact is the first thing that we need.
definitely. And part of being able to earn that relationship and to get that permission is recognizing that uh, we are not just workers, that we don't come to the office and wear a hat as worker, employee, whatever, and that only. We just don't do that anymore because our culture has changed. So we can discuss the good, the bad, and the indifferent about the changes that have occurred, but the fact is, the changes have occurred, and as a result, we've got to work with that environment. And that one of the changes, big changes, is what you just mentioned, is that people are human and that they function in a human environment and not one of a, if you will, I guess a way of putting it is a robotic environment. For my generation, our management style was based in being driven by authority. And as workers, generally speaking, we were more robotic than human. And I don't mean that in a harsh way. It was just a fact of the way we were trained and brought up. And I suppose it's probably an impact of the Industrial Revolution and production and mass production and all of that. But the idea of us being human was just, we were an employee. We were paid to do a job. You do your job, you get to keep it. And that's about the size of it. And the idea was if you could keep it long enough, you could get a retirement. And so that was kind of the view. But the culture we have today doesn't work that way, not at all. So, welcome, Sharon. Always glad to see you with us. Hope all is well with you and your family. Thanks for being here. So, what are some of the principles that we need to talk about in terms of impact as a leader? And your thoughts on that, Anton?
Well, I think that we hit it already to start with, impacting the whole human, right? Impacting the entire person, not just the professional side of them, not just, what we want them to do for their job. And some of those things start with things like inclusion and diversity,
Mm,
right? It's the leader's job to make sure that they create a very inclusive space to where everybody feels that they are part of this team. They're part of this organization. They're part of something greater than themselves.
Mm,
That's a really important part. The other part that goes with it is the diversity of thought, diversity
mhm.
of people. You The difference between what you're talking about when people were managing and they were managing more robotic versions of humans, that stuff wasn't as needed
Mhm.
because you just showed up, you did the basic things. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it wasn't needed. I'm saying it wasn't perceived as needed.
Right.
And now we're working in environments where things are constantly changing, where the organizations are global. So trying to operate without having people's full potential within the workplace is very disadvantageous. How's that word?
Disadvantageous.
Disadvantageous. Yeah, ESL here shows up once in a while, um, to the organization, and it's up to the leader to create those kind of environments where people bring their best selves. Without inclusion and diversity, that's not going to happen. There's just no way.
Well, what's interesting to me, and this I recently came to understand and began to think about this, is in the past, we used to think if people looked alike, they were alike. And that even then, that was a fallacy because each of us are very unique. And so, regardless of our appearance, size, shape, color, ethnic origin, whatever, doesn't mean that we were at that point we're all alike. We just had similar appearance. And what the challenge for a leader is to recognize the unique individual among us, that each of us are unique. And especially when you start talking about thinking processes and creativity and other intangibles, and the sooner we recognize, regardless of the look of people, that they are unique, then we can welcome and become much more comfortable with diverse people, and because diversity is well beyond just physical appearance. And when we begin as a leader, if we don't get that and we don't operate under the principles of recognizing unique qualities of individuals, we're going to make a huge mistake foundationally, because what we want is that diversity. The value of the diversity in our team is that it brings different perspective, different talents, different skill sets. And the way an effective leader works with that group is to help by tasking according to strengths. So, and to get a team that has complementary strengths and complementary weaknesses. And that's your ideal situation on a team to be able to have impact and welcome those differences, welcome the diversity in that group. And that's a challenge because part of what we have to do as a leader is be comfortable with our own uniqueness. One of the challenges we see among leaders is that they're not comfortable with themselves. And when you're not comfortable with yourself, it's going to be difficult to get comfortable with differences and uniquenesses among your team members. And so, yeah, diversity is there, and it's well beyond our physical makeup. And when we begin to accept and even appreciate that, then we have a chance of bringing together a team that we can develop and move forward. And think about just sports teams. In sports teams, we have some similar roles on sports teams, and then we have very diverse roles on sports teams. But in order for that team to be effective, we need all the roles taken care of, represented. And so, as a leader, when we began to look and say, okay, for example, there's leaders that are not organizers, and that's just the fact of who they are. That makes them, gives them additional challenge because as a leader, you need to be able to organize. But in the event that you're not an organizer, then look for someone on your team that can help complement your weakness by being a strong organizer, and that becomes part of their tasking. And that makes the team work better that way. Rather than creating conflict, we've created complementary relationships through our diversity, our differences, our skills, and so on. So, yes, you're very right on that. Another one that is real important is the environment of the team. And we talk about organizational ecosystem and those pieces, and that's about culture and environment. And one of the foundational pieces that as a leader that we must create, and this is something we do by applying principles, and that is we have to create what I prefer to call a secure environment. Some people say a safe environment. I shy away from that a bit because of some of the connotations that have come along about safe places and things like that. I prefer to call it secure environment. And what happens is when people are secure in their environment, they are going to be more willing, first of all, to be themselves. Second of all, to risk and take initiative by saying things, offering suggestions, giving ideas, giving feedback that in a non-secure environment, they're not going to do. They're going to be in a protective mode. Your thoughts on that one, Anton?
I mean, one feeds the other. We mentioned diversity and inclusion and secure environment, safe environment, whatever you want to call it, psychological safety, all those things kind of go into it. You can't have one without the other, right? If you don't have a safe, secure, psychologically safe environment, you're not going to have diversity, true diversity, true inclusion. All those things are not going to happen. But at the same time, without diversity and inclusion, you're not going to have those other ones, because people are going to go look around and say, everybody's the same. And if I'm not like them, then, I don't belong. And then they're not going to feel secure and safe there. So all these things really tie off together. The other one that comes to mind to me is development. And this is really close to my heart, but development beyond the job. Like, I don't mean just development within their role. That's important, but that's the most fundamental level of development, is how to do your job. You want to look at, leaders have a really good ability of basically getting people up to speed or getting the skills necessary to perform their job within a short time frame, right? Time to mastery. And good leaders are able to accomplish that with minimal time to mastery. The really great leaders are able to go, okay, these are the skills they need now, but here's the skills they're going to need in their future roles. If I want to keep them here at the company, that's step one, right? Like, what is the next opportunity for them? What do they want to do? Inspire them to reach higher. I talked about this a while ago. God, it's been a couple of years, but job number one is, if your people don't want your job or jobs ahead of their jobs, there's a fundamental problem within your organization. There's something happening. And I'm not saying everybody's always going to want to, because many people just don't necessarily care about moving up. They're happy where they are. We talked about rock stars and superstars many times in the show. They're rock stars that just know the job in and out, and they're happy there. But there's many people who want to be superstars. But if there's not, look at how you're leading, or look how people before you were leading, right? So, quick story. I took over a market many years ago. This was 2016. And I asked it was a massive meeting, and I said, raise your hand if you want to move up. I'm looking to do leadership development, set up a program, and teach you guys what to do and how to move up. Not a single hand went up. Nobody's hands went up. And I came from a market where everybody was wanting to move up. Everybody was moving up. So I was starting to, get upset a little bit. I'm like, what is going on? What has happened here? So I started to investigate. I started to look at, what was the previous leader doing? And this person made the job look awful. They were always stressed out. They were working crazy hours, all the things that your typical overworked leader does, because they're only looking at their output as an individual,
Hmm.
person, and not seeing the greater impact that they're making on perception of the team of what leadership is like. So I had to change how I operated. I've actually was one of those people myself, but I was like, I cannot continue to be like that. I have to show that this job is doable within 8 hours. I have to show that it's enjoyable. I have to take care of my own stress and be engaged with my team members and act like I'm having fun, not act like I'm having a show that I'm having fun.
Hmm.
And with time, we had full room of people packed in, ready to do leadership development, not because of anything that I did to them or for them. I just showed that this can be a fun role, and it pays well, and it comes with certain freedoms, and it comes with ability to make impact and show them how that's possible. So I think that that's step one of development, is getting people to reach higher, but showing them that it's possible for them and maintaining their lifestyle and their families and all this stuff. And it's fun.
Yeah. Let's see. Sharon's got a comment. The person that has strength should be able to help the others feel comfortable and help them learn. Everyone has different strengths and weaknesses because everyone is different. The last manager I had was excellent. He gave us the tools to do the job the right way, and yet was there to help anyone that needed help. Each person had a different strength and weakness, and you help the others learn. Team is very important to be able to work with the, oh my, hang on. Let me get to Sharon's comment on another screen here. Um, to work with these people. And so, indeed, and the other part of the value there is that we've got to be able, as a leader, to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of each person. So, one of the real practical aspects of being a leader is knowing your people, and that can come in very variety of forms, but it has to be a priority and a purpose to do so. If you don't, you will begin to make decisions and back to that robotic process that we were talking about that was around before, and unfortunately still around in some situations. Welcome, Atif. Glad to have you. It's been a while, but good to see you. And so, yes, that becomes important, and that has to be a priority as a leader. And then Sharon has another comment, says that development, teach your team what is necessary to do their job and give them the skills and classes to attend necessary to help them feel comfortable and learn. And no doubt, as a leader, one of the things that, again, is a priority is how am I going to help my team develop, not as a production machine, not as a robot, but as a person. And sometimes that development may not be specifically directly related to a job skill set. It may be a I don't know. I was going to say communication, but that's an essential part of a job skill set. Um, it may be about health, and that's something that, as a leader, considering the health of our team members is very critical. And so we make allowance for development for a healthier person, body, mind, spirit, whatever. And so development is indeed a key part of making things happen and having an impact in a good way, because leaders, especially leaders that don't apply principles of leadership, that are just in the role, they're going to have an impact, but it's not going to be a good impact. And so we have to consider that. The other one that comes to my mind as part of development is, and this is something I've struggled with over the years because of the misunderstanding of the term leader. But as a leader, we want to help every one of our team members develop as a leader. Okay. And the old saying is, well, good leaders you're not a good leader if you're not developing other leaders. And I say, okay, I go along with that with a caveat. And the caveat is that doesn't mean that everyone's going to become leaders of others, not in the job site, because a majority of the people on teams are not leaders. They are followers. And I have to be careful. I know people get upset and say, I don't follow anybody. That the term follower has got its own set of negative connotation. And, but what we're doing is we're asking people to follow us to get something done. And we need to create those leaders among our team, but they may not always be leaders of other people. But what they do need to be, and this is the essential part, is they need to be leaders of themselves. In order to be effective, if they can't lead themselves, then we have a whole different set of challenges, of problems. Thoughts on that one, Anton?
I'm just going to take a slightly different angle on it.
Okay.
Develop them for their next level, whatever that level is.
Right.
And something that I would add to this, right? I think that great leaders that make great impact, they don't just focus on the next level within their company, within their organization. They look at what is important to this person and what do they want that next level to be. Sometimes it's moving up into the next role that may be more advanced, right? On the construction side, you used that analogy. There's roles that are much more advanced on the construction side, but they're not leaders, right? And unfortunately, I just experienced this with my girlfriend. She works so hard, incredibly hard worker. She handles the most cases at her job. And the time came to a job opened up because they finally got more funding to have a new role. She applied for the role. And even though she's one of the hardest workers, she was missing a skill. And it was a rudimentary skill. It wasn't a skill that like you could read a book and you have this skill. But she didn't get this job. They hired an external candidate over her because she was missing this skill. She's been there for 2 years. And I'm going to myself, how did her leadership not take this hard worker and give her an opportunity to get this extra skill? Send her to a course, get her a textbook, work with her one-on-one, whatever it may be. How big of a failure is that you take this person that genuinely cares about organization vision, organization mission, like cares about the people there, the employees, the customers, as much as probably more than the leaders there, to be honest with you. But yet they didn't get it because of this one skill. Well, that's not how the leader should make impact. You need to look ahead and think about what does our organization need, or where is this person going to need, and go ahead and invest some time and money into it to make that happen. And if not, you are failing good people that are going to go look elsewhere because you just really wounded them, right? And that's what comes to mind. But even outside of that, we talk about succession planning as something that we focus like organizational safety, right? It's almost like we're protecting our organization by having succession planning to keep our best people. That's not the best approach. I'm sorry. It's good. I get it. You take care of your people no matter where they stay with your organization or not. You build them for their next level, because that if they want to leave, if that's something that they say, you know what, I'm working in this job right now. I'm working in this organization, but I actually want to do this job. I want to go to college and I want to maybe get my master's or whatever level it is. And it shows that they're not going to stay with your company. Guess what? Still develop them for that next thing, because they will find a way to stick with you as long as possible because they see that you're growing them as a leader. They may not stay with the company, but they'll stay with you. I'm saying they would still be with the company, but not because of the company, but because of you, as long as possible. Chances are you'll keep them there longer than otherwise would anyway, even if you're preparing them to leave. And that's the one that I don't see leaders cross over very often, is preparing people for the next level, even if it's not with their organization.
Or even their team. It may be that you're going to develop that person to be on a different team within the organization. But and this is goes to a mindset, a different perspective. And one of the things that I propose is that the only way to be a real leader is to be a servant leader. And servant leaders are willing to develop others, not for the necessarily for the leader's benefit, even the team's benefit always, but for to benefit the person. And you think, okay, well, I'm going to always be losing people and so on, but not so. Anton just talked about it. The loyalty that you develop with that person becomes remarkable. And when you get that level of loyalty, that's another impact. When you work with someone and develop loyalty, they will stick with you through things. And they're going to be the ones that when, we all have these projects where things go sideways and we've got to put in extra effort and go beyond the minimum. And those are the people that will do that. And I like what you said, Anton, about people sticking with the leader. When we hire on with a company, we have an idea of what's going on with the company and a certain degree of parameters if we've done any kind of homework. The part we don't always know, and this is part of the flaw of our system of recruiting people and onboarding and things, is they don't know who they're going to be led by. And what happens is that, and this has been shown with data and evidence and everything else, that when people leave companies, it's generally not the company that they're leaving. They're leaving their supervisor, their boss, their manager, whatever term you want to apply to it. The person responsible for leading them is usually the cause of them leaving. It's not the organization, because the organization, if we have any concept going in, we have already understood that the leader, the manager, is the unknown, and they are the ones that will make or break the relationship between one of their team members and the organization. And so that's such a critical thing to understand. And the other one, and you mentioned this earlier, Anton, is example. And the power of an effective leader is by their example, their role modeling. That's one of the biggest ways we impact those around us on our team. And in fact, that is so powerful, it can impact other leaders in the organization, including the leaders that we report to. That's how we can, if we're in a situation where we're leading in an organization where it's not a leadership environment by nature, we can impact it by our model and our example to a point to affect change in the whole organization if we do it right. Let's see. Sharon has a comment. Says, could be, Anton, that she was such a good worker that they didn't want to lose her. Some managers, unfortunately, do that.
But you end up losing them anyway, right? I mean, you burn them this way, and you don't just see. The thing is, this is what happens, right? Like, everybody's watching everybody at work. So if I am also in that role, right, and I see this incredibly hard worker, and I see what happened to them, am I likely to strive to be better, or am I likely to start looking for another job because I don't see a future? What's hopeless for me, if this amazing worker can't get there, who am I to think that I can get there if if I don't consider myself at her level, at his level, whatever it may be, right? And you're spot on. Some managers unfortunately do that, and I think a lot of managers unfortunately do that. And many people do it unintentionally sometimes, because the kind of development we're talking about is it's a very you have to be very conscious about what's going on. You have to be very aware. You have to really understand what these people want and need. And you really have to be looking around the corner all the time, right? That's ability of great leaders have ability to see around corners. That's what we have to do as leaders. It's not just about seeing what's right in front of us. It's being prepared what's coming up, right? So knowing that in using that situation that they're raising funds to be able to have this next role, why not prepare internal people for that? I think it's the worst thing you can do. You added a brand new shiny thing and you gave it away to an outsider. To
Mm,
me, that's heartbreaking for culture.
very much so. And in fact, I would suggest that that is a key piece of why we're seeing quiet quitting. Because when you take away anyone's initiative or their incentive, then they're going to, human nature tells you, just get along with what you can just to keep your job. And the sad thing is, even then, they'll keep their job long enough to find something that will give them what they're looking for. And so, if people, when you start watching people quiet quitting, two things are need to be an obvious to you. One, there's a leadership problem, and that is creating a bad situation. Second is they're not long for your organization. They're going to be on the fast track to find a different place, a different leader to work under, period. And if you're not attuned to that, that's another leadership problem that is not recognized. ATIF has shared, just so you know, ATIF does some HR and leadership training in his own way, and he has shared with us a resource. I'm not familiar necessarily with it, but it sounds like a good development possibility. So be sure and take advantage of that. Let's see here. Uh, Sharon's comment. uh, Very true indeed. I'll say for myself, I left so many times and transferred to another job to leave the supervisor, who was a nightmare, unfortunately. I've been there and done that, and then it was time to leave. This these this is part of the key to good impact as a leader, is that you want to give people reason to stay with you. In fact, I think it's Richard Branson talks about, develop your people to a point that they could easily leave and qualify for other roles and positions, but give them such an environment, such a culture, such a relationship that they don't want to leave. And that is so spot on. Uh, Again, we still haven't shifted in a lot of ways in the workforce. The original motivator for my generation was you got a job, you got some benefits, and you got a pension to look forward to. And for us, that was a fundamental basis to maintain your job. In fact, it was common for my generation. People start complaining about not having this or wanting that or whatever. The common response is, "Well, you've got a job and you're getting paid. What more do you want?" And that mindset is still, unfortunately, in the workplace. And that mindset is part of the reason we have the challenges and difficulties that we're having. The lack of leadership, people that will only manage. And when you manage, you fit people into the right boxes. And as long as they're there and production's good, then in your mind, you're very accomplished. One of the evidences that the original management style is still out there, and this is important, is this whole question of how we deal with remote work. And I've been disappointed and surprised, or surprised and disappointed, I guess, depending on the way you want to look at it, that even some of the so-called progressive companies, I believe Google is one of the ones that is in this lot, and that is they are requiring everyone to come back to the office. And by doing so, they indicate to me that somewhere in their organization, that they still are holding on to old management style of dealing with people. And part of the motivation, I suspect, is they've got this very expensive building. And if everybody doesn't come back to the office, they don't have justification to have that very expensive building. But I believe at the core of it is still the mindset that in order to have productive workers, the leadership, the managers have to be able to lay eyes on people. And that is an unfortunate approach, because by that very act, one of the big pieces of information or perception that we're putting out there is we don't trust you. And if you tell your folks that you don't trust them, you just killed your culture. You killed your environment. Because as Anton said, as we started this thing, part of what has to happen is a trust relationship. That's a key component to be an effective leader. Because without trust, it's us and them, and that's the relationship. With trust, it's all of us together. Thoughts on that one, Anton?
No, absolutely. I just have another side comment to make. This popped in my mind. Ties into it, right? To leaders and not wanting to lead leaders, but people want to be compensated, right? I think compensation is number one on what employees want. And I actually yesterday just had my mind change on something, not change, but adjusted. I used to think pay wasn't as important as I thought, because once people reached 75K, which was the old number, you had to find alternative ways to motivate them. The reality is, and there's a research that I just heard came out very, very recently from Princeton that now raises that number to $500,000. So
Wow.
people keep being motivated up to that level with, and then it really dwindles down. They're no longer care about pay as much as other things. The thing that I want to point out, that part is not as controllable. You have budgets, you have, limitations to how much you can pay people. Yes, I agree. We should always pay people fair and as much as we can. But if we are fiscally responsible, we can't pay more than we're profiting, more than we're taking in. Like there's no matter what, there's always going to be limitations. Otherwise, we're not going to have a business to pay people at all. That's the reality. But that is so hard to change that you have to be really good at adjusting the other things that are much more controllable, right? Like you have to be really good at everything that we're talking about. You have to be that kind of leader that motivates people and inspires people, because you may be not able to pay them more, right? Like especially if you're working, say, in a nonprofit organization, like I've been using an example of, you just can't write a bigger check to them because you don't have enough funding to do so. For that reason, we have to be hyper vigilant for those other things and what they want, because the number one thing that people want, you can only adjust so far.
Good point. Great point. Having worked in the nonprofit world for a number of years, that is such a key piece. In the nonprofit world, you're depending on donations and support, and it's not always there. And you have to begin to develop leadership mindset and leadership thinking, and even some leadership skills to help give value to people in their role outside of pay. Obviously, we want and need to pay people as much as humanly possible because that's the right thing. But with our limitations fiscally, there are other ways to add value to the job beyond what is paid. And that includes, one example right now that's in front of us is strategic flexibility. If we may not be able to pay them as much as we want, but if we allow them to work from home or work remotely, then we've added value, and it works for many people. And the value, and I'm just going to be very practical here in Atlanta, not commuting from the suburbs to downtown is like giving someone a raise. because the cost of commuting is quite remarkable. The latter couple of years that I was working with this organization, my job shifted. I moved to be close to my job so I didn't have to commute, because anybody that knows Atlanta knows commuting is not the ticket. And so I had purposely for years avoided having to commute downtown. Well, the job that I was involved in shifted. And so I started commuting from the suburbs to downtown. And I did the math on it, and just rough cost was about $8,000 a year to add commute to what I did. And when we talk about incentivizing, one way to incentivize is consider strategic flexibility, remote work, home work from home, whatever, telework, whatever term you like. We kind of came up with strategic flexibility because it's more than just saying, oh, everybody stay home. But that is a value add that we can give that literally adds dollar value to someone's work situation, to their life. And those are the kinds of things that a leader looks for and finds. And a good leader gets creative. I was trying to think. I mean, we poke fun a little bit at ping pong tables and uh, billiard tables, but that's a creative approach to add some value into someone's life, especially if they like playing ping pong or pool. And so getting resourceful as a leader to help add those values will make a huge difference in a positive impact, without a doubt.
I've been in the consulting world, external and internal, for quite some time, and that's what it's all about. There, it's adding value. It's finding ways to add value, because people don't deny your services or not buy your services because you're too expensive. It's because they don't see enough value in what it is they're getting from you. Well, leaders need to look at leading in a very similar way. We have to really assess each individual, just like a consultant organization or assesses organizational environment, and we have to find unique ways that we can add value to them beyond. Yes, I say beyond pay. It's not because I'm saying pay is not important. That's a table stake thing. Like, you need to pay people what they're worth and what you should be paying the market rates and things like that, if not better, if you can. But outside of that, a leader that makes impact is able to assess it on the deepest levels and see, this is how I can add value into their life. This is how I can add value into their work. This is how I can add value into their health, whatever it may be. And then keep working on it, keep growing that value. Think about it like a consultant comes in. They don't just give you a tool and walk away. They keep working with you to teach you how to use that tool to get the most out of it. I'll even run with a ping pong table analogy, right? It's one thing to put a ping pong table. It's another thing if you started having tournaments with your teams and facilitating an environment that pulls them towards that ping pong table. And now all of a sudden we're getting true value out of that ping pong table, and we're adding true value into people's lives and the work environment because of the community that ping pong table created. So that's what an impactful leader needs to do, is assess and add value where they can. I really like that word.
Yeah, that's a missing part in so much. When we talk about annual reviews are no more than a checkbox exercise, generally speaking, that an organization has to somehow justify what they do. The reality is that we should be reviewing our team members on an ongoing basis. Now, how frequently we report it, that's different. But a good leader is always assessing and evaluating their followers, their team members, because that's how you find those value adds that you can have more control over and can affect. And what you said, Anton, is so spot on. The ping pong table is a tool, but the effective leader makes it become part of the culture so that it becomes a motivator. It becomes even, we talk about stress all the time. Whatever it is should also be a stress reliever, because that's part of what we need to be doing to help and motivate our team members. And so if you can take a ping pong table and turn it into a stress reliever and team builder that's built in, that's such a win, it's not even funny. Now, caution, not everybody likes ping pong. And so if all you do is buy a ping pong table and do ping pong tournaments, depending on your team, you may leave others out. Don't know. But that's the role of the leader, assessing that and determining the impact that it will have and you want it to have. That's part of being an effective leader, is determining impact and steering impact by your choices. So important. Let's see here. Sharon has a comment. The last job I had such a fantastic leader that I would have never left if I had a choice. I finished the project way ahead of schedule and they had no more work for me to do. He was the best leader I ever worked for. I learned from him as a leader and used the information that I learned to teach others. Um, Sharon brings up an interesting point. As a leader, if I'm doing what I need to do and I'm having the impact that I want to have, the people that I lead should begin to model the same behaviors to each other. And they will begin to do things such as use what they learn from us to help others. That includes on the team. And if that's not happening, as a leader, you need to go, okay, why not? And back to what Anton talked about, people that don't want the leader's role, it's because the leader's role looks terrible. And the example of that leader is not one of encouragement or, setting an example of something to want to strive for. And if that's not present, you have to ask the question, what am I doing as a leader? Am I having impact, or am I having only negative impact? It's all part of the consideration, which brings me to another principle related to being an impactful leader. Anytime there is a team problem, and if you are an impactful leader, as my friend Max Story says, a high impact leader, okay, the first thing that's going to happen when there's a problem on your team, you're going to stop and look in the mirror. And you're going to say, okay, how have I affected or not affected this situation to either cause it or to allow it? And whether you cause it or allow it, it is still your responsibility as a leader. And the best way to do that is check the mirror, look and do introspection, do evaluation of yourself. Thoughts on that one, Anton?
No, absolutely. I mean, we have to look inside, and from that standpoint, I would add, you have to maintain your leadership capacity. So your capacity to lead, your capacity to add value, your capacity to do every single thing that we just talked about. And if you're not taking care of yourself as a leader, that capacity is going to shrink. I talk about this with mothers. I talk about this with ourselves from stress. But leadership is not any different. You can only give so much value until you start to run out, unless you do something to nurture yourself and take care of yourself, whether it be your mental health, your physical health, whatever health, spiritual health, whatever health you're looking at. You have to be able to do that. The other part is you also have to be led well. Every leader usually has a leader. There's nobody that has no leader in front of them, whether it be a mentor, even CEOs have mentors and they're led by coaches, whatever it may be, right? Refill your own bucket, but also maintain the capacity. Because if you constantly just give value, but you don't take care of yourself, pretty soon your capacity of your maximal output shrinks. You're still giving 100%. but it's 100% of half compared to what it used to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you got to make sure that you're nurturing your leadership capacity.
Something we talk about on a regular basis, folks, is taking care of yourself. And we've got tools and we've got the ability to help come into leaders or organizations and help them understand some of those things. So if you're in a situation and you don't find that your leaders are surviving, then give us a call. We'll be glad to get with you and get on as consulting team to help you work through that. ATIF makes a comment, and I think this is a good one. It starts with the willingness to abandon the heroic leader myth. And I want to jump on that for just a second by itself. Leaders that are real leaders, like I said before, are servant leaders. They're not trying to be heroes. They're trying to do the best for the team as much as possible. They are not this heroic leader. They're not there to save the day. They're there to help their team and build their team. He goes on to say, in a VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world, the I alone leader runs the risk of being starved for information, which can leave the leader unable to keep pace with the increasing rate of change in customers, markets, economies. Leaders need to accept their vulnerability to what they do not know and in turn embrace the groups in which they can assimilate and act on more information. This is, hold on, I have to go to another screen. Leaders need to accept their vulnerability to what they do not know and in turn embrace the groups in which they can assimilate and act on more information. It is in, hang on with me. Sorry about that, guys. Funny thing on the stream is it doesn't show everything to a point. Oh, Anton, do you see the rest of it? I'm abandoning the I alone heroic. No. I don't want to. Wow. And the comment is great. And I'm having trouble with seeing the and unable to keep pace, change economies. Leaders need to accept their vulnerability to what they do not know, and in turn embrace the groups that they can assimilate and act on more information. It is the mosaic of relationship that leaders can find answers to the questions they ask, but more importantly, to the questions they do not ask or do not know to ask. In abandoning the I alone heroic leader myth, leaders also need to challenge the assumption that professional distance is helpful. Instead, we propose that leaders err on the side of building close personal relationships with their key reports in order to build more open and trusting bonds that provide resiliency and information flow vital to adaptive decision making. A mouthful, but so profound. That is a great share, ATIF, and it is indeed kind of goes to the heart, and it's back to what we said in the beginning: relationship. Difference between a leadership and a manager is relationship. The extent of relationship with a manager is, what do you do for me to check off the boxes that I have to have checked off? That's the manager approach. And it's about check boxes and strictly KPIs, not just KPIs about the things we manage, but KPIs strictly related to the people. And that is where we have such a breakdown in our current workforce culture, is lacking that relationship that builds on team, builds on purpose. And the other key, and Anton knows that I've got to get this in, and that is, if you as a leader want to make great impact, positive impact, you better be able to communicate your vision, mission, and values, because that is how you motivate rather than dictate. You've got to get people on your team willing to buy into the vision, mission, and values that the organization has, that you have, and that they share at least on some level. It's not always going to be a perfect alignment, but if you don't have common ground in vision, mission, values, you're going to be defeated before you ever start. Excuse me. Closing thoughts, Anton?
Just look for opportunity to make impact, right? I think that's thought number one. And then if not able to, get help, as Atif talked about, ask the right questions from others and how to help others to succeed and how to help others grow within your team, and you'll be all right, right? Don't be afraid to do those things.
None of us are perfect. Find out where your weaknesses are and find opportunity to complement them with your team. And that may be a matter of just the right relationships with the right people on your team. So thanks, everyone. I appreciate those of you that are here today. The conversation and information's been really good. That was a great comment closing out, Atif. Thank you for that. Well put. And we'll be back next week and covering our next topic. And we're going to be going forward inviting more guests to join us to share and have input. So be watching for those announcements going forward as well. So thanks, everyone. Have an amazing week. God bless. And we look forward to seeing you back next week on Tuesday morning at 8:00 a.m. Now, just a reminder that we're on Eastern Daylight Time now. So if you're joining us from somewhere else, we're an hour different than we were last week. So just be aware. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye now.